My name is Daniel Reyes, and the day my boss humiliated me in front of the entire office is the day I realized something about myself that I had never known before. I am capable of staying silent while someone tries to break me, but I am also capable of breaking the entire world they stand on if they push too far. It all began on a Monday morning, the kind that feels like it has already been a week before you even take your first sip of coffee. Our company had just landed what was supposed to be a milestone deal, one that would open doors and finally elevate us from a struggling mid-tier firm to a major competitor, and I had spent the entire weekend fine-tuning the presentation, rehearsing every word, making sure the data was bulletproof. I had barely slept, barely eaten, because deep inside I believed that if I proved myself that day, I'd finally get the respect I'd been quietly working for over 3 years. My boss, Andrew Mercer, was a man everyone feared, not because he was brilliant, but because he was ruthless in the most casual ways. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he didn't slam desks. No, he was the type of person who could destroy your confidence with a single smirk. The type who weaponized sarcasm, who acted as if decency was something beneath him. People didn't avoid him because he was tough. They avoided him because being near him made you feel smaller, like he stole a piece of your dignity just by entering the room. And that Monday, he walked into the conference room with that smug expression he always had when he knew he held everyone as fate in his hands. I had the projector ready, slides queued up, charts clear, and for the first time ever, I felt proud of my work. Until he took one look at the screen and laughed. Not a small laugh, an exaggerated, sharp burst that echoed through the room as the whole team froze. "This is what you spent all weekend on, Daniel," he said loudly, deliberately, as if he were performing for an invisible audience. A few people pretended not to hear, others stared at the table, and I just felt the heat rising in my face. "This," he continued, waving his hand at the slides, "looks like something a student slapped together the night before a deadline. Amateur hour. That line amateur hour would replay in my head like a broken record later. At that moment, I tried to speak, tried to explain the logic behind the layout, but he cut me off with a hand gesture like he was shooing away a fly. "Sit down," he snapped. "I'll present it myself." And just like that, the presentation I had poured my soul into was ripped out of my hands. I sat there, jaw clenched, listening as he butchered it. Yes, butchered my work while pretending it was entirely his creation. Every time he got a detail right, he puffed up as if he were a genius. Every time he got one wrong, he shot a glance at me like I was an incompetent distraction. I could feel my coworkers' silent pity. Some avoided eye contact, some looked uncomfortable, and a few those who'd been in my shoes gave me the tiniest nods of solidarity. But the damage was done. The clients left with forced smiles, clearly unimpressed. And as soon as they were gone, Andrew walked back into the room, clapped his hands once, and said in front of everyone, "Well, folks, I think it is clear Daniel isn't ready for real responsibility. Maybe stick to simpler tasks for now, okay?" The room fell dead silent. It wasn't so what he said, it was how he said it, like I was a child who had spilled juice on the carpet. I felt my throat tighten. I felt something crack, not anger, not sadness, but something sharper, something cold. I gathered my things quietly, pretending his words didn't sting like 1,000 needles, and headed to my desk. But then something happened. On his way to his office, Andrew S. phone buzzed and he tossed it onto the table next to the coffee machine when he went to refill his mug. I don't know what made me glance at the screen. Fate, maybe. Or maybe the universe sometimes gets tired of watching injustice and decides to intervene. The notification preview read, "Urgent. The audit discrepancies you asked me to hide can stay buried. Call me ASAP," my breath caught. Audit discrepancies? Buried. Those were not casual words. My heart began pounding, and before I could think, before I could question, before I could stop myself, I picked up his phone and scrolled through the notification history. Message after message from someone named Dean Harris, a name I recognized as the external auditor he had recommended the company use for the past year. And the more I read, the clearer it became. Andrew had been manipulating financial reports, hiding losses, inflating performance metrics, and covering up expenditures that absolutely should not have been covered up. And suddenly everything clicked. His stress, his paranoia, his short temper, his obsession with controlling every report, every presentation, every department. He wasn't managing the company, he was covering his tracks. And then I saw it, the message that changed everything. If anyone in your company digs deeper, especially Daniel Reyes, we want to be able to maintain this narrative. My blood ran cold. He had been watching me, monitoring my work, making sure I never got close to the real numbers. Suddenly the humiliation made sense. He didn't belittle me because I was incompetent. He belittled me because I was a threat, because my questions, my attention to detail, my insistence on verifying data could expose him. He humiliated me publicly to break my confidence, to keep me in line, to make sure I never questioned anything again. But he didn't know one thing I don't break. Not like that. Not ever. In that moment, something inside me snapped into perfect clarity, not rage, not vengeance, but a razor-sharp sense of purpose. If he wanted to make me smaller, I was going to make his entire world collapse. I put the phone back exactly where it had been, walked to my desk, and opened every document, every file, every archived report I could access. And what I found over the next hours was worse, much worse than I expected. He hadn't just altered numbers. He had rerouted budget funds into shell accounts. He had billed the company for consulting services that didn't exist. He had marked losses as operational fluctuations. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized the truth. My boss was committing corporate fraud on a scale that could not only destroy the company, it could land him in prison. But the story doesn't end there. Because exposing someone like Andrew isn't simple. He had power, influence, connections. He could crush careers with a single email. But he made one mistake, one fatal mistake. He underestimated the quiet guy, the guy he thought he could humiliate into obedience, the guy he thought would never fight back. He didn't know that the moment he took my dignity in front of everyone, I had nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the room. What happened next? How I gathered proof, how I cornered him, how I exposed his biggest lie in front of the same people he humiliated me in front of, and how it destroyed him, that is a story that gets much, much darker. And it all began with the moment he humiliated me and ended with the moment he begged me for mercy. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, but because something inside me had shifted into a level of focus I had never experienced before. It felt like every slight, every belittling comment, every humiliating moment suddenly fused together into fuel. If Andrew had spent months, maybe years, undermining me just to keep me away from the truth, then he had already declared war long before I even realized there was a battlefield. And now that I knew what he'd been hiding, I wasn't scared, I was electrified. I woke up early the next morning, far earlier than I ever would have for work, and spread dozens of printed reports across my kitchen table. I needed patterns, timelines, paper trails. Everything had to fit into a clear narrative one even he couldn't deny. The numbers spoke loudest. Money funneled into strategic consulting, invoices from contractors who didn't exist, expenses mislabeled so sloppily it was almost insulting. If he wasn't such a narcissist, he might be realized how sloppy he'd become. But arrogance breeds carelessness, and carelessness breeds evidence. By noon, I already had enough proof to destroy his entire career, but destroying him wasn't enough. He had publicly humiliated me, and if I simply reported him quietly, he would slither away with excuses, disguise the truth, twist narratives, and maybe even pin some of it on the department. No, the truth needed to be revealed publicly. He needed to fall the same way he made me fall with everyone watching, with no way to rewrite what happened. There was only one problem. If he caught even a whisper of what I was doing, he'd retaliate swiftly. He'd revoke my access, manipulate HR, poison my reputation, maybe even try to get me fired for misconduct. Men like him lived by one rule: control everything or destroy what you can control. So I played the long game. For the next week, I acted like nothing was wrong. I showed up early, I volunteered for tasks, I nodded politely when he dismissed my ideas. I even smiled when he threw shade at me in meetings because he needed to believe he had broken me. And judging by the smug relaxation in his posture, he absolutely believed it. Men like Andrew loved the illusion of dominance. He thought he had me exactly where he wanted me. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was building a case so airtight it could suffocate him. I exported server logs, backed up emails, documented timestamp discrepancies, pulled archived financial statements from the internal server, and printed copies of suspicious invoices. I even cross-referenced them with public business registries. None of the listed contractors had real addresses. It was a network of lies, piled on top of lies, wrapped in the illusion of competence. But the final piece came unexpectedly. One day, while I was digging through archived folders, old ones he probably forgot existed, I found a hidden file labeled simply Q4 Revised. It looked suspicious, so I opened it, and my heart raced. This wasn't just fraud. This was calculated deception. He had created 2 versions of quarterly financial reports, one for internal review, one for outsiders, and depending on who requested information, he would send whichever version protected him the most. The internal one was accurate and reflected massive losses. The external one painted a picture of soaring growth and record-breaking revenue. It was deliberate, dangerous, and absolutely illegal, and suddenly I wasn't just holding evidence, I was holding a weapon powerful enough to end him permanently. But revenge is never simple. I knew that once I pulled the trigger on this plan, everything would change. So before I made my move, I needed to be smart. I copied everything twice. One copy on a USB drive I kept on me at all times, another copy encrypted in cloud storage under a disguised name. If anything happened to me, if he tried to retaliate, if someone deleted files, the truth would still survive. By Friday evening, I had built something like a digital time bomb. All that remained was deciding where to detonate it. I considered sending it directly to the board, but that felt too quiet, too clean, too private. It wouldn't undo the humiliation he put me through. It wouldn't balance the scales. Men like him don't just need consequences, they need exposure. So I came up with a plan, one that would make sure he felt the impact publicly and immediately. The company held a monthly all-hands meeting, a showcase event where department heads presented updates, future plans, and financial highlights. And guess who always opened the meeting with a dramatic speech? Andrew. He loved those meetings, loved the spotlight, loved the validation, loved the power. So I decided that if he wanted an audience, I'd give him one. But the universe wasn't done helping me yet. The night before the meeting, something happened that pushed me from determined to unstoppable. I was working late, organizing the evidence into a single presentation that would shatter him when I overheard a conversation outside my office. Two colleagues were whispering about me, voices low but clear enough. He is done for, one of them said. Andrew told HR he is considering letting Daniel go. Said he is underperforming. I froze. Underperforming? Me? The guy doing work so thorough it threatened to expose him? Yeah, the other whispered. Andrew said Daniel embarrassed him in front of clients. I think he's trying to push him out quietly. Push me out. Quietly. Just like that. No warning. No chance to defend myself. No recognition of the years I put into the job. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was trying to erase me. And that was the moment my revenge shifted from necessary to personal. If he wanted war, he would get absolute, devastating war. The next morning, I arrived earlier than everyone. I plugged a USB drive into the main presentation system in the auditorium. I encrypted the file with a password only I knew, so it wouldn't open until the exact moment I wanted it to. Then, I sat in the third row, calm, steady, almost serene. When the room filled and the projector lit up the stage, Andrew walked out with the confidence of a king entering his court. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and began with his usual lines. Good morning, everyone. Today I want to celebrate our achievements, hypocrisy, smooth as polished marble. This quarter has been one of our strongest lies, wrapped in corporate language, and I want to thank the team for their dedication. Even bigger lies, but the universe must have a sense of humor, because just as he was about to click to the next slide, the screen flickered. Once. Twice. Then the file I had queued silently opened by itself. The title displayed across the massive screen behind him. The truth behind the numbers, uncovering financial manipulation. The entire room went silent. Andrew froze. His eyes widened. For the first time, I saw fear crack through his arrogance. Who put this here? He stammered. But it was too late. The file autoplayed, and on the screen appeared the evidence, every forged report, every false invoice, every manipulated number laid out in perfect clarity. Gasps erupted across the room. The CFO stood up in shock. The HR director covered her mouth. The board members who had attended to hear the quarterly updates leaned forward in disbelief. Andrew stumbled back, gripping the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him from collapsing. This is fake, he shouted. This is fabricated. Someone is framing me. And that was when I stood up. Calm. Controlled. Unshakable. Actually, I said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. It's all real. I verified every number myself. Heads turned, eyes locked onto me. Andrew looked like he had been physically struck. Daniel, he hissed, you don't know what you're doing. No, I replied. I know exactly what I am doing. And the final slide appeared, a time-stamped message from the auditor. If anyone digs deeper, especially Daniel Reyes, the truth will surface. It was over. Not slowly, not quietly, not gently, but explosively, publicly, and in the exact same environment where he once humiliated me. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He tried to blame me, but no one listened. He tried to shut down the projector, but security stepped in. Before the meeting ended, the board suspended him. Before the day ended, he was escorted out of the building. And as he passed me, defeated, trembling with rage, he whispered something I'll never forget. You will regret this. But the only thing I regretted was not doing it sooner. In the hours after Andrew was escorted out of the building, the office felt like the aftermath of a storm, silent, shaken, and somehow brighter. People whispered in corners, eyes darting toward me with a mixture of disbelief and admiration, but I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Revenge is rarely a single blow. It's a series of aftershocks, and I knew the biggest ones were still coming. The board called me into a private conference room that afternoon, a room so cold and polished it felt more like a courtroom than a meeting space. They sat in a semicircle, some stern, some bewildered, all clearly rattled by the revelation. The CFO, a woman known for her meticulous judgment, leaned forward and said, Daniel, we need to understand exactly what you discovered and how long this has been going on. I expected hostility, suspicion, maybe even an accusation that I participated in the cover-up, but instead their tone was cautious, respectful even. So I walked them through everything, the fraudulent invoices, the altered reports, the hidden file, the messages from the auditor. I explained how I found the evidence, how I verified each document, and why I chose the all-hands meeting to expose it. They listened closely, nodding, exchanging glances as each detail landed like another weight on Andrew S. Grave. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then the CEO, who had been unusually quiet, said, Daniel, what you did saved this company. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something warm in my chest. Validation. Not public, not dramatic, not vengeful, just genuine acknowledgement from someone in power. But as the board began discussing next steps, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think this is over? You don't know me. I didn't have to guess who it was. Andrew was many things, but subtle was never one of them. I locked the phone and refocused, but his words sat in the back of my mind like the faint smell of gasoline, something that warns you a fire might still be coming. Over the next week, the company launched a full investigation. My department was interrogated, financial records were dissected, lawyers swarmed the building like vultures circling a carcass. Everyone was tense, but oddly enough, I felt calm. I had told the truth, presented facts, and protected myself with multiple backups. I wasn't afraid not of losing my job, not of retaliation, not of Andrew. That is, until the emails started. The first one was subtle. People like you don't climb. They get crushed. The second was angrier. You stole everything from me. The third was darker. I know secrets too. And then came the fourth, the one that made my blood run cold. You think I was hiding something? You haven't even scratched the surface. I stared at that line for a long time, replaying every word, wondering what he meant. What was he bluffing? Trying to scare me? Or was there something bigger, deeper, more dangerous beneath what I uncovered? That night, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Daniel, a voice whispered, low and icy. You don't understand the people you're dealing with? It wasn't Andrew. It was someone else. Someone calm. Someone professional. Who is this? I asked. A friend, the voice replied, and an enemy, depending on what you do next. A chill slithered down my spine. Andrew didn't act alone, the voice continued, and the money he moved wasn't his. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I asked. The voice paused, then said, to warn you. Stop digging. The call ended. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at my reflection in the dark window. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I marched straight to the board and told them about the calls and emails. They exchanged looks again, but this time they weren't just concerned, they were alarmed. The CFO said, Daniel, we didn't want to burden you with this yet, but there's more to the situation than Andrew S. actions. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. Some of the shell accounts Andrew funneled money into are connected to a larger network, one we believe may involve people outside the company. Corporate crime, external parties, organized financial schemes. The picture was expanding into something far bigger than office politics or revenge. We reworking with authorities, she continued, but whoever contacted you, they shouldn't have your number. That is a problem. A problem. That was an understatement. That night, I found a man sitting in his car across from my apartment building, staring at my window. When I stepped outside, he drove away without looking back. The next morning, someone had rifled through my mailbox. Nothing stolen, just disturbed. A message without words. A reminder that I wasn't supposed to feel safe. But fear has a strange effect on some people. It either paralyzes you or sharpens you, and I felt sharper than ever. If there was more to uncover, I needed to find it. Not just to protect myself, but because something in me refused to be intimidated by shadows after everything I'd already fought. So I started digging again, not into financial reports this time, but into Andrew S. connections. His emails, his private calendar files, his travel receipts, his erased folders. Many were empty shells, deleted trails, wiped records, but some contained clues, names, addresses, meeting notes, and one name kept appearing repeatedly. Rothwell Dynamics, a consulting firm, a private contractor, a financial intermediary, but the deeper I dug, the more bizarre it became because Rothwell Dynamics didn't exist online. No website. No corporate registry, no physical office. It was a ghost company, and ghost companies rarely serve legitimate clients. My mind spun with the possibilities. Was Andrew laundering money? Was he working with criminal networks? Was the company being used as a front for something illegal? The idea sounded insane, but so did everything that had happened. The turning point came when I discovered an email chain between Andrew and someone named J.S. The messages were cryptic, short, and tense. Funds transferred. Expectant confirmation. The revised Q4 document must remain internal. If Reyes continues asking questions, handle it. Handle it. Handle me. I realized then that Andrew hadn't just been trying to humiliate me. He had been trying to discredit me because someone else instructed him to. Someone who saw me as a threat. That says, so when I made the biggest decision of my life, I called the detective overseeing the investigation and handed everything over the files, the emails, the phone logs, the hidden documents. He listened carefully, then finally said, Daniel, what you've uncovered might be part of a multi-state fraud operation. We need to move fast. Everything after that blurred together. Federal investigators were called in, warrants were issued, accounts were frozen, employees were interviewed again. The company buzzed with rumors of arrests and conspiracies, but the strangest part was this. Andrew had vanished. Completely. No address, no forwarding information, no trace. As if he disappeared the moment he left the building. Days went by, then a week, then another. Until one night, 3 weeks after the all hands meeting, there was a knock on my door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I hesitated, then opened it just a crack. And standing there was Andrew. But not the Andrew I remembered. His hair was disheveled. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were wild, filled with something between terror and desperation. "Daniel," he whispered urgently. "You don't know what you've done." "Get away from my door," I said sharply. "Listen to me," he hissed. "You think I'm the villain? You think I'm the one you should be afraid of?" His voice trembled. Andrew Mercer, corporate tyrant, master manipulator, ego of steel, was shaking. "They were coming for you," he whispered. "Not because of what you exposed, but because you exposed the wrong people." I slammed the door in his face. But the truth was, my hands were shaking too, because part of me believed him. I didn't sleep after Andrew showed up at my door. I couldn't tea. His words rattled inside my skull like loose screws shaking around in an engine that was minutes from exploding. "You exposed the wrong people?" What the hell did that even mean? I paced my living room for hours, replaying every detail of his face, gaunt, frantic, terrified. That wasn't the face of a man angry about losing his job. That was the face of a man running for his life. By sunrise, I still hadn't stopped shaking. I kept replaying his warning over and over, wondering whether he was manipulating me again, or whether he was the only person telling me the truth. And then, as if the universe wanted to answer that question for me, my phone rang. Unknown number, I let it ring. It rang again. Same number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Just the faint sound of breathing. "Daniel," a calm voice said, the same one that had called me before. "You were warned to stop." My chest tightened. "Who are you?" I demanded, feeling adrenaline spike through my veins. "Someone who does not tolerate disruptions," the voice replied. "Someone who expects obedience?" "I don't owe you anything," I snapped. "You don't even know me." A low chuckle. Slow, amused. "We know everything about you," the voice replied. "Your schedule, your friends, your habits." My stomach dropped. "Do not mistake survival for cleverness," the voice continued. "You exposed a small piece of the truth. But if you keep digging, you want to live long enough to expose anything else." The call disconnected before I could speak. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't stress. This wasn't corporate fallout. This was real danger, deadly danger, and I was in the center of something way bigger than a corrupt boss. My first instinct was to call the detective again. When I explained what happened, his tone shifted instantly from professional curiosity to something tighter, more serious. "Daniel," he said carefully, "we've suspected there were outside parties involved, but if someone is contacting you directly, that means they're watching you." "Watching me," I echoed, heart pounding. "Why me? I am nobody." "Exactly," he replied, "which makes you vulnerable." Vulnerable. The last thing I wanted to be. The detective insisted on meeting in person at a secure location, a public space where no one could track us easily. We met at a crowded cafe, people coming and going in constant movement. He slid into the seat across from me, not bothering with pleasantries. "I am going to be straight with you," he began. "The network linked to those shell accounts, we've been tracking them for almost a year. They were connected to a group that deals with corporate siphoning and financial laundering." "So, Andrew was working for them?" I asked. "Not exactly," he replied. "More like he became useful to them. They find companies with weak internal structures. They target executives. They manipulate finances from the inside, then bleed the company dry." "So, who are they?" I asked. "We don't know," he said flatly. "They don't leave names. They don't leave faces. They exist through digital shadows." A cold feeling washed over me. "And now they were after me? They think you've seen too much." His expression hardened. "If they contacted you directly, you're in danger." I swallowed. "What about Andrew?" "He disappeared," the detective said, vanished after his suspension. "No flights, no credit card activity, no trace." "He came to my apartment," I said. The detective froze. "When?" "Last night. And you didn't call us?" "I didn't know if I should trust him," I admitted. "What did he say?" "Not much," I said, "just that I exposed the wrong people." The detective cursed under his breath and leaned back. "If he is running from them, is desperate. That means the people behind this are cleaning house." "Cleaning house?" "Tying loose ends," the detective clarified darkly. I stared at the table, my mind spinning. "What do I do?" I finally asked. "For now, stay alert, stay predictable. Dante, do anything that makes you look like a threat." "And if they come after me?" The detective lowered his voice. "They want to come after you directly. They'll destabilize you, scare you, make you feel watched. That is how they gain control." I didn't feel reassured. Not even a little bit. Over the next few days, strange things began happening. Subtle things. Shadows that lingered too long near my building. Cars that idled across the street with the engine running. People walking behind me a little too closely. Someone slipped a note under my door that said, "Stop." No signature, no explanation, just that one word, stop. But stopping wasn't an option. Not anymore. Because while they were watching me, I was also watching them. I started noticing patterns. The same dark sedan parked on my street. The same man pretending to talk on his phone near the office. The same pair of eyes behind tinted sunglasses. They weren't subtle. They were intentional. Psychological warfare. A show of power, and every time I felt fear creeping in, I remembered Andrew S. trembling voice. "You think I am the villain?" If he was right, and God help me, I feared he was then, the real villains hadn't even shown their faces yet. One night, I returned home and found my apartment door slightly open. My throat tightened instantly. I slipped inside quietly, every instinct on high alert. Nothing looked stolen. Nothing was out of place. But then, I saw my laptop. Moved. Slightly angled. I approached slowly. The screen was off, but a single sticky note rested on top of the keyboard. "Last warning." My legs nearly gave out. I backed away, phone in hand, ready to call the detective until the lights flickered. Twice, quickly, deliberately. Someone was still in the building, maybe watching, maybe waiting. My pulse hammered so hard I felt it in my teeth. I spent that night in a motel, sitting fully clothed on top of the blanket, staring at the wall, trying to process what my life had become. In less than a month, I had gone from a humiliated employee to the target of a criminal network that operated like ghosts. And yet, there was a part of me that refused to be broken. I wasn't just surviving. I was adapting, learning. And then fate intervened again, this time in the form of an email from an unfamiliar address. No subject, no message body, just a single attachment, a scan of a document. When I opened it, I felt the ground shift beneath me. It was a contract, a payment agreement between Andrew and someone with the initials JS, the same initials from the cryptic emails ID found. Except this document contained something new, something explosive. A signature, a real name, Julian Sloan. I had never heard of him, but he existed. He was real. And his signature was the missing puzzle piece investigators needed. I forwarded the document to the detective immediately. Minutes later, he called me, breathless. "Daniel, this is big. This name has come up in offshore account investigations. We've never been able to connect him directly to anything. Until now," I said. "Until now," he confirmed. "Stay put. We're putting surveillance on you." And Daniel, his voice dropped. "This could bring the entire operation down." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. A tiny spark, but enough to keep me going. But hope can be dangerous, especially when it shows itself too early. The next night, while I was walking home from work, someone grabbed me from behind, a hand over my mouth, an arm around my chest. I struggled, panicked, trying to break free. Then a voice hissed in my ear. "You should be stopped!" I thrashed harder, desperate for air, desperate for anything, when suddenly headlights flooded the alley, tires screeched, the attacker shoved me to the ground and fled into the darkness. A car door slammed. The detective sprinted toward me. "Daniel!" he shouted. "Are you hurt?" I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, shaking violently. "We've got units sweeping the area," he said. "We'll find him." But we didn't say to. Whoever grabbed me vanished as quickly as he appeared, and something inside me snapped, not in fear, but in resolve. If they wanted me silent, I would speak louder. If they wanted me scared, I would become dangerous. If they wanted me gone, I would become impossible to erase. And that was the night I made my choice. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to end them, all of them. No matter how deep the network ran, no matter how powerful they were, no matter what it cost me. Because now it wasn't just revenge anymore. It was survival. The night I decided to go on the offensive, something inside me shifted permanently, not just my mindset, but something deeper. Something primal. It was like fear had burned itself out and left only a sharp, cold determination behind. The detective had insisted I stay under surveillance, but being watched didn't mean I was safe. It just meant someone was close enough to witness whatever happened to me. I wasn't content with survival anymore. I needed answers, and more importantly, I needed control. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of bitter coffee and stared at the name on the contract. Julian Sloan. That signature had power. It was a thread, and if I pulled hard enough, maybe the entire web would unravel. So I started digging, not into corporate files, those were locked down by investigators, but into the corners of the internet where people like Julian left traces they assumed no one would find. Public conferences, charity events, business panels, old financial reports, buried articles. Bit by bit, a profile emerged, wealthy, private, influential, with investments in a maze of companies that were registered in places where laws bent like rubber. One detail stood out. Sloan wasn't just a consultant, he was a fixer. Someone companies hired when they wanted problems erased quietly. And Andrew had signed a contract with him. That meant Andrew wasn't a mastermind, he was a pawn. A disposable piece, and disposable pieces were the ones most likely to panic and most likely to know secrets, which meant I needed to find him. Before they did, before anyone erased the only person who could connect every dot. I tried calling him, no answer. Texts went unread, emails bounced back. Days passed. Then unexpectedly I received a message from an unfamiliar encrypted account. If you want the truth, come alone. 9 p.m., Pier 17. There was no signature, but I knew it was him. It had to be. The detective insisted I ignore it, but something in my gut told me I couldn't T. If Andrew was reaching out, it meant he was desperate. Desperate people dawn to set traps, they seek shelter. So, at 8:45 p.m., I stood at Pier 17, wind whipping against my jacket, waves slamming rhythmically against the wooden posts. The pier was dimly lit, mostly abandoned, the kind of place where secrets hung in the air like fog. At 9 p.m. sharp, a figure emerged from behind a stack of shipping crates. Andrew, he looked even worse than the last time I saw him, eyes sunken, beard uneven, clothes wrinkled, a man collapsing under the weight of fear. You came, he whispered, glancing around nervously. I didn't think you would. You said you had the truth, I replied. Talk. He swallowed hard, wringing his hands. You think this started with me, he said. You think I am the one who pulled the strings. But I wasn't in control. I never was. His voice cracked. They approached me. I didn't approach them. Who? I demanded. He hesitated, then whispered. Julian Sloan. Hearing the name, spoken aloud, sent a chill through me. He offered consulting opportunities, Andrew continued. Said he could help our company through financial rough patches. Said he could make numbers look better during bad quarters. At first, it seemed harmless. Just cosmetic adjustments. He began pacing, running his fingers through his hair, but then he asked for access. To accounts, to reports, to departments. And once he had access, things changed. How? I pressed. He started moving money, Andrew said. Small amounts at first, funds routed through side accounts, reclassified expenses, invisible transactions. I didn't think much of it. I thought he knew what he was doing. He let out a bitter laugh. I was an idiot. I crossed my arms. Why involve me? Andrew froze. They didn't want you involved, he said. You weren't a part of the plan. You were just inconvenient. Inconvenient? You ask questions, Andrew said. You verify numbers. You don't let inconsistencies slide. They saw you as a threat even before I did. Sloan told me to keep you in line. My stomach twisted. Humiliate you, discredit you, make sure you never touch the financials again. That was my job. A wave of anger surged through me. You tried to ruin me. I tried to survive, Andrew whispered. But then you found the files, and once you exposed me, they panicked. They don't care about people, Daniel. They care about control. And when I became a liability, he looked out at the dark water, eyes filled with exhaustion. They tried to kill me. My breath caught. What? The night I disappeared, he said quietly, was the night they came for me. He lifted his shirt slightly. A long, healing slash ran across his ribs. My jaw tightened. This wasn't T-paranoia. This wasn't T-theatrics. He had been attacked. I ran, he said. I've been running ever since. Why come to me? I asked. His eyes met mine, fragile, desperate, pleading. Because you are the only one who exposed them. The only one who found something real, and the only one who can finish what you started. Before I could respond, a sound cut through the air, a soft click, like a footstep, or the cocking of a gun. Andrew S. eyes widened. They found us, he whispered. He grabbed my arm. Run. A shot rang out. The wooden post near my head splintered. I staggered back, adrenaline blasting through my veins. Two figures emerged from the shadows, black jackets, covered faces, moving with a chilling calmness. Andrew shoved me behind him. Go, he yelled. They don't want you dead. They want me. Another shot. He grunted, falling to one knee. I grabbed his arm, pulling him up, but he shook his head violently. If you don't run now, he rasped, neither of us survives. I hesitated. He saw it. Go, Daniel, he whispered. Please. It was the first time he ever said please to me. I turned and ran down the pier, across the lot, breath tearing out of my chest. Behind me, I heard one final shot, then silence. Crushing, suffocating silence. My legs kept moving, even though every cell in my body wanted to collapse. By the time I reached the main road, my lungs were on fire, my vision blurred, and I collapsed into the arms of the detective who had been trailing nearby surveillance. Where is he? The detective asked urgently. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The look in his eyes told me he already knew the answer. What followed was a blur of sirens, shouting, officers swarming the pier, evidence markers under floodlights, yet no trace of the shooters, and no sign of Andrew. Gone, not vanished like before. Gone. They took the one person who could tie everything together, who could testify, who could explain, and now I was the only one left. The detective placed a hand on my shoulder. Daniel, he said gently, you need to go into protective custody. Protective custody. My life had become something out of a thriller novel, but I wasn't ready to disappear. Not when someone else was still out there pulling strings. We have enough evidence to issue an arrest warrant for Sloan, the detective continued. Your information helped us reach him. He's on the run. And what about the people who attacked us? I asked. We were hunting them too. But the way he said it, the tightness in his jaw told me he knew this wasn't going to be simple. The network behind Sloan was bigger, smarter, deeper, and taking down one man wouldn't collapse the entire structure. Still, I agreed to protective custody. I didn't want to die, not after coming this far. They moved me to a safe house, plain walls, reinforced locks, minimal windows. Agents rotated in shifts outside my door. It felt less like protection and more like a waiting room between life and death. Days passed, investigations moved, arrests were attempted, and one morning the detective stepped into my safe house with a tentative smile. We got him, he said. Who? I asked. Julian Sloan. He's in custody. Relief and disbelief washed over me at the same time. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said, you testify. And we take down everyone connected to him. My story, my evidence, my survival, it all became part of the official record. Months later, the network fractured under the weight of investigations, confessions, seized accounts, and legal pressure. Some ran, some turned themselves in, some vanished into the shadows they came from. And me, I rebuilt my life. Slowly, cautiously, a new job, a new apartment, a new beginning. But sometimes when I walk through a crowd, I still feel eyes on me. When a phone rings with an unknown number, my chest tightens. And sometimes, late at night, I remember Andrew S. last words. You exposed the wrong people. Maybe I did. Maybe the wrong people were exactly the right ones. Because in the end, I didn't just expose a lie. I exposed a world built on deception. A world that thinks people like me don't matter. A world that underestimates the quiet ones. And if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that the quiet ones are the ones you should fear the most.